Husband spent Christmas with his mistress, and his wife's calm exit left him in regret and tears. Hello, beautiful souls. Merry Christmas to everyone. This video is my Christmas special gift to all of you. Dear God, thank you for the gift of Jesus and the joy of this season. Bless everyone watching with peace, love, and happiness. May your light guide us and bring hope to all hearts. Amen. This Christmas, I'll be celebrating with loved ones, cherishing the warmth of togetherness. Where will you be celebrating this special season? I'd love to hear. Merry Christmas, and may your holiday be filled with love and blessings. Let's begin the tale. The morning sun painted downtown Dallas in hues of amber and gold, casting long shadows across the steel and glass empire Samuel Peterborough had built from nothing but dreams and determination. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office on the 42nd floor, Samuel adjusted his hand-tailored Tom Ford suit, a small gesture that had become habit over his 20 years in business. At 42, he'd achieved what most men only fantasized about. Billions in the bank, respect that bordered on reverence, and a reputation for turning everything he touched into gold. Yet on this particular Tuesday in September, something felt different in the air. Perhaps it was the way the autumn light caught the edges of the buildings he'd raised from paper plans to towering reality. Or maybe it was just that inexplicable sixth sense that successful businessmen often claimed guided their most profitable decisions. Whatever it was, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that today would change everything. The boardroom buzzed with the usual pre-meeting energy. Junior executives nervously shuffling papers, senior partners engaging in carefully measured small talk, and the subtle symphony of coffee cups meeting saucers. Samuel took his customary seat at the head of the 20-foot mahogany table, its surface reflecting the morning light like still water. This was meant to be just another quarterly marketing review, the kind he'd sat through hundreds of times before. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. "Mr. Peterborough," his assistant Margaret whispered, leaning close to his ear. "The new marketing director from Thompson and Associates is here to present their proposal." She passed him a portfolio with their firm's logo embossed in silver. Samuel nodded absently, his attention already drifting to the quarterly projections displayed on the screen before him, and then she walked in. Time seemed to slow, the ambient noise of the boardroom fading to a distant hum as Lola Rose made her entrance. She moved with the kind of grace that couldn't be taught, each step purposeful yet fluid, commanding attention without demanding it. Her olive silk dress whispered against her curves, the material catching the light in a way that made it seem alive. But it wasn't just her beauty that caused every head in the room to turn. It was the air of quiet confidence she carried, the invisible force field of competence and sophistication that preceded her. Her chestnut hair was styled in elegant waves that framed her face, highlighting the striking architecture of her cheekbones and the subtle warmth in her complexion that spoke of exotic heritage. When she reached the podium, she smiled, and Samuel felt his carefully constructed world shift on its axis. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice carrying a hint of an accent that Samuel couldn't quite place. British undertones mixed with something more melodic, perhaps Caribbean. "I'm Lola Rose, Director of Strategic Marketing at Thompson and Associates." She paused, her hazel eyes scanning the room before landing on Samuel, holding his gaze for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Today, I'll be presenting our comprehensive marketing strategy for the Peterborough Tower West project." Samuel found himself leaning forward slightly, drawn in not just by her presence, but by the way she commanded the room. Her presentation was flawless, every statistic backed by solid research, every projection grounded in real-world data. She moved through complex market analyses with the ease of someone discussing the weather, making even the most technical aspects accessible and engaging. But it was more than her professional expertise that captivated him. It was the way she gestured with her hands when making an important point, the slight tilt of her head when considering a question, the subtle arch of her eyebrow when delivering a particularly impressive statistic. She was a study in elegant contradictions, professionally polished yet authentically warm, confident yet approachable, serious about her work yet quick to smile at the occasional joke from her audience. As she discussed market penetration strategies, Samuel found himself noticing the smallest details. The delicate gold bracelet that caught the light when she gestured, the way she pronounced certain words with that fascinating accent, the intelligence that sparkled in her eyes when she fielded complex questions from his senior staff. She wasn't just presenting, she was orchestrating a masterclass in business communication. The meeting ran 30 minutes over schedule, but not a single person checked their watch or shifted restlessly in their seat. When Lola concluded her presentation, the applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Samuel watched as she gracefully accepted compliments from his team, noting how she remembered everyone's names and responded to their questions with genuine interest. As the room began to clear, Samuel remained seated, pretending to review his notes while actually gathering his thoughts. For the first time in years, he felt slightly off balance, like a teenager working up the courage to talk to his first crush. He, Samuel Peterborough, the man who could negotiate billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, found himself wondering how to orchestrate a simple conversation. Lola was gathering her materials, sliding presentation boards into a sleek leather portfolio with methodical precision. The sunlight streaming through the windows caught her hair, revealing auburn highlights he hadn't noticed before. Without looking up, she spoke, "I hope the presentation met your expectations, Mr. Peterborough." Her voice carried that same musical quality that had enchanted him throughout the presentation, but now, in the relative quiet of the emptying boardroom, it seemed more intimate, more personal. Samuel stood, straightening his tie more out of habit than necessity. "Please call me Samuel," he replied, moving around the table with measured steps. "And your presentation didn't just meet expectations, it exceeded them in every way." He reached for one of her business cards resting on the podium, noting the elegant simplicity of the design. "I have a feeling this is the beginning of a very productive partnership." Lola looked up then, meeting his gaze with a smile that seemed to hold a hint of something more than professional courtesy. "I certainly hope so," she replied, closing her portfolio with a subtle click. Thompson and Associates prides itself on building lasting relationships. As she gathered her belongings, Samuel found himself searching for a reason to prolong the conversation. "Your accent," he began, genuine curiosity mixing with strategic interest. "It's fascinating. British with something else?" Her eyes lit up with pleasure at the observation. "Good ear," she acknowledged. "I was born in Guyana but educated in London. The result is rather a linguistic cocktail, I'm afraid." "It's beautiful," Samuel said before he could stop himself, then quickly added, "unique. It adds character to your presentations." A slight blush colored her cheeks, and she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the first sign of anything less than complete professional composure he'd seen from her. "Thank you," she said softly, then glanced at her watch. "I should be going. I have another meeting across town." Samuel walked her to the boardroom door, hyper-aware of the subtle fragrance of her perfume, something exotic and elegant that he couldn't quite identify. "We'll be in touch about the proposal," he said, holding the door open for her. "I look forward to it," Lola replied, passing close enough that the sleeve of her dress brushed against his suit jacket. The brief contact sent an unexpected current through him, like touching a live wire he hadn't known was there. As he watched her walk away, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor, Samuel knew with absolute certainty that his earlier premonition had been correct. This day had changed everything. He just didn't know yet how completely his life was about to transform. Later that evening, as Samuel sat in his penthouse home office reviewing Lola's proposal for the third time, he realized he wasn't actually reading the words anymore. Instead, he was remembering the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she smiled, the graceful movement of her hands as she explained complex market trends, the musical lilt of her voice that made even the driest statistics sound like poetry. He picked up his phone, then set it down again, then picked it up once more, scrolling to Thompson and Associates' contact information. It was too soon to call about the proposal. That would seem eager, unprofessional. But perhaps an email. Just a few clarifying questions about the market analysis on page 37. Professional, reasonable, an excuse to keep the conversation going. As he drafted and redrafted the email, choosing each word with the same care he used in multi-million-dollar contracts, Samuel Peterborough, titan of industry, master of the Dallas skyline, finally admitted to himself what he'd known since she first walked into that boardroom. He was already falling for Lola Rose, and his life would never be quite the same again. Chapter 2. The Art of Pursuit 3. Carefully crafted emails and 2 conference calls later, Samuel Peterborough found himself no closer to winning Lola Rose's personal attention. Each of her responses was the perfect blend of professional courtesy and polite distance, leaving him both frustrated and increasingly intrigued. For the first time in decades, he was pursuing something he couldn't simply acquire through wealth or influence. The October morning brought a crisp change to the Dallas air as Samuel stood in his private elevator, absently adjusting his cobalt blue tie. The same tie, he realized with a small smile, that he'd worn to 3 meetings this week, all coincidentally scheduled at Thompson and Associates. His reputation for efficient decision-making was beginning to suffer as he dragged out the contract negotiations, searching for any excuse to extend their professional interactions. "The coffee shop in the lobby, sir," his driver asked as they reached the ground floor, already familiar with his employer's newly established morning routine. "Yes, James." The usual time. Samuel checked his Patek Philippe watch, 8:45 a.m. He'd noticed over the past weeks that Lola typically bought her morning coffee at 9 a.m., a detail he'd filed away with the same precision he usually reserved for market analyses and construction timelines. The lobby cafe, with its marble countertops and artisanal coffee selection, had become his informal command center for Operation Win Lola's Heart, though he'd never admit to giving it such a romantic title, even in his own thoughts. He selected a table with a clear view of both entrances, opened his laptop, and prepared to look completely absorbed in work while actually watching the door with the attention of a hawk. At precisely 8:57 a.m., his phone buzzed with a message from Margaret about an urgent meeting with Chinese investors. He ignored it. Some things were more important than business, a revelation that would have shocked him just months ago. The door chimed at 9:02 a.m., and there she was. Lola entered wearing a deep burgundy pencil dress that made Samuel forget how to breathe for a moment. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist today, exposing the graceful line of her neck. She moved to the counter with that same fluid grace he'd first noticed in the boardroom, exchanging warm greetings with the barista. This was it. After weeks of carefully orchestrated, accidental encounters that had resulted in nothing more than polite nods and professional small talk, Samuel had decided today would be different. He stood, timing his movement to intersect with her path, just as she received her order. What happened next wasn't part of his meticulously planned strategy. In his eagerness to appear casual, he miscalculated the distance to the cream and sugar station. His shoulder caught Lola's elbow just as she was turning with her fresh cup of coffee. Time seemed to slow as the cup tilted, its contents describing a perfect arc through the air before painting a brown Jackson Pollock across his pristine white shirt and blue tie. "Oh my God!" Lola gasped, her professional composure cracking for the first time since he'd met her. "I'm so terribly sorry, Mr. Peterborough." Her accent grew stronger with distress, making his name sound like music despite the circumstances. Samuel looked down at his ruined shirt, then back at Lola's mortified expression, and did something that surprised them both. He laughed. Not the careful, measured chuckle he used in business meetings, but a genuine, deep laugh that came from somewhere he'd forgotten existed. "Please," he said, still chuckling as he grabbed a handful of napkins from the nearby dispenser, "after christening me with your coffee, I think you can call me Samuel." He dabbed ineffectually at his shirt, knowing it was a lost cause but prolonging the moment. A smile tugged at the corners of Lola's mouth, transforming her concerned expression into something warmer. "Samuel, then, though I'm not sure ruining your undoubtedly expensive shirt is the best way to get on first-name terms." "On the contrary," he replied, tossing the soaked napkins into a nearby bin, "I'd say it's the perfect icebreaker. Allow me to buy you a replacement coffee? It's the least I can do for so rudely interrupting your morning routine." Lola tilted her head slightly, studying him with those intelligent hazel eyes. "Interrupting my routine? Should I be concerned that you know my coffee schedule, Samuel?" He felt a flash of panic before recognizing the teasing glint in her eye. "I plead the fifth," he responded with a grin, "though I will admit to having excellent observational skills. It's part of what makes me good at my job." "And what else are these excellent observational skills telling you?" she asked, moving with him toward the counter. "That you take your coffee with 1 sugar and a splash of cream," he said without hesitation. "That you prefer wearing jewel tones because they complement your complexion. That you're left-handed but use your right hand for gesturing during presentations. And that you've been deliberately maintaining professional distance despite our obvious connection." The barista called out another customer's order, but neither of them moved. Lola's eyes widened slightly at his directness, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "That's quite observant indeed," she said softly. "Too observant?" he asked, suddenly worried he'd overstepped. She considered for a moment, then smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and made his heart skip a beat. "No," she decided. "Just observant enough to be intriguing rather than alarming, though I'm not sure whether to be flattered or concerned that you've been paying such close attention." "Be flattered," he said, stepping closer to the counter. "I assure you, I don't memorize anyone else's coffee preferences or color choices." He turned to the barista. "1 medium latte with 1 sugar and a splash of cream, please. And a black coffee for me." As they waited for their drinks, the morning sun streamed through the cafe's windows, catching the auburn highlights in Lola's hair. Samuel found himself fascinated by the way she tucked a loose strand behind her ear, a small, unconscious gesture that seemed more revealing than any of their previous professional interactions. "You know," she said thoughtfully, accepting her fresh coffee from the barista, "this isn't exactly how I imagined our first real conversation would go." "You've imagined our first real conversation?" Samuel couldn't keep the pleasure from his voice. "Perhaps," she admitted, those hazel eyes meeting his with a hint of mischief. "Though in my imagination, you were wearing considerably less coffee." Samuel laughed again, realizing how long it had been since he'd felt this light, this genuine. "Well, now you've got me at a disadvantage. I'll have to change before my next meeting, which means leaving this conversation far sooner than I'd like." "That would be the professional thing to do," Lola agreed, but made no move to leave. "I've discovered recently that being professional isn't always the most important thing," Samuel said, taking a chance. "Have dinner with me tonight." It wasn't a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. Lola took a sip of her coffee, regarding him over the rim of her cup. "That would be complicated," she said finally. "The contract negotiations are handled by my team," he finished. "And besides, I think we both know I decided to accept Thompson and Associates' proposal weeks ago. The only reason we're still negotiating is because I've been looking for excuses to see you." Her eyebrows rose at his honesty. "That's not very professional, Mr. Peterborough." "Samuel," he corrected gently. "And no, it's not professional at all. It's personal. Very personal. Have dinner with me, Lola." She was quiet for a long moment, and Samuel felt his heart pounding in a way it hadn't since he was a young man making his first real estate deal. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "No." Before his heart could finish sinking, she continued, "But ask me again next week, after the contract is signed, and we're no longer in danger of mixing business with pleasure." The smile that spread across Samuel's face was genuine enough to make his cheeks hurt. "Next week, then," he agreed, "though I should warn you, I'm not known for my patience." "And I'm not known for being easily rushed," she countered, gathering her belongings. "Good day, Samuel. Do try to stay away from flying coffee until we meet again." He watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that seemed to match his heartbeat. The coffee stain on his shirt was cooling uncomfortably against his skin, but he couldn't bring himself to care. For the first time in years, Samuel Peterborough had something to look forward to that had nothing to do with business. The next week passed in a blur of deliberately expedited meetings and rushed contract reviews. Samuel's legal team was surprised but pleased by his sudden urgency to close the deal with Thompson and Associates. If they noticed that their boss's usual ruthless negotiating style had softened somewhat, they were wise enough not to mention it. Finally, 7 days after the coffee incident, Samuel stood in his closet, surveying his collection of ties with unprecedented uncertainty. The contract had been signed that morning, with minimal fanfare and maximum efficiency. He'd waited exactly 4 hours, long enough to be respectful, but not long enough to suggest disinterest, before sending Lola a message. "Dinner? I know a place that serves excellent coffee for dessert." Her response had come quickly. 8 p.m., though perhaps we should stick to wine. Now, as the Dallas skyline blazed with the colors of sunset, Samuel found himself feeling something he hadn't experienced in decades: nervous anticipation. He finally selected a deep burgundy tie that matched the dress she'd worn the day of the coffee incident, hoping she'd notice the reference. As his driver navigated through the evening traffic toward the small Italian restaurant he'd chosen, intimate but not presumptuous, elegant but not showy, Samuel realized that for the first time in his adult life, his success or failure at something truly mattered to him on a personal level. Buildings could be rebuilt, contracts could be renegotiated, but this evening felt like the beginning of something irreplaceable. The hostess led him to a quiet corner table with a view of both the street and the restaurant's small garden. He checked his watch, 7:55 p.m. For once in his life, Samuel Peterborough was early for something that didn't involve making money. At precisely 8 p.m., the restaurant's door opened, and Lola entered wearing a midnight blue dress that made the stars themselves seem dull in comparison. As she approached the table, Samuel stood, his carefully prepared greeting forgotten as he took in the sight of her. Professional polish replaced by a softer, more personal elegance. "You're wearing my coffee's favorite tie," she said by way of greeting, her eyes twinkling with amusement. And just like that, any remaining nervousness dissolved into comfortable warmth. As they settled into their seats, Samuel realized that while he might have built an empire of steel and glass, the real foundation of his future was just beginning to take shape across a candlelit table on an ordinary Thursday evening in Dallas. Chapter 3. Hearts Under Construction. That first dinner stretched into 3 hours of conversation that felt like minutes. As the restaurant staff quietly stacked chairs around them, Samuel and Lola remained lost in their own world, discovering the kind of connection that made time itself seem irrelevant. When they finally emerged into the cool Dallas night, neither wanted the evening to end. "Walk with me?" Samuel asked, offering his arm. The late October air carried just enough chill to make the gesture practical as well as romantic. Lola slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, and they began strolling through the nearby park, their path lit by antique street lamps that cast warm pools of light on the cobblestones. "Tell me about Guyana," he said softly, covering her hand with his own. "I want to know everything about what made you who you are." Lola's eyes took on a distant, warm glow as she spoke of her childhood home. "Georgetown is a city of contradictions," she began, her accent growing stronger with memory. "Colonial architecture next to modern buildings, street vendors selling mangoes beside fancy cafes. My father was a professor of literature, my mother taught dance. They filled our home with books and music and the belief that anything was possible." They passed a fountain whose water sparkled like diamonds in the lamplight. "What brought you to London?" Samuel asked, genuinely fascinated by every detail she shared. "A scholarship to LSE when I was 18, she replied. "I was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. London was so different from home, the weather, the pace, the people. But it taught me adaptability, showed me that I could thrive anywhere if I stayed true to myself." Samuel stopped walking, turning to face her. "And what brought you to Dallas?" A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Opportunity, challenge, the chance to prove myself in the American market." She paused, looking up at him through long lashes. "Though I'm beginning to think it might have been fate." Their first kiss happened there, beneath the oak trees and starlight, with the fountain providing a gentle soundtrack to the moment. It was soft, tentative at first, then deepening into something that felt like coming home and embarking on an adventure all at once. That night marked the beginning of a courtship that would become legend in Dallas society circles. Samuel Peterborough, the man known for building the city skyline, set about building something far more precious, a relationship founded on respect, understanding, and deepening love. Their second date was at a small French bistro where Samuel confessed his own humble beginnings, the son of a carpenter who'd learned the construction business from the ground up. Lola listened with rapt attention as he described his first project, a small renovation that had barely covered its costs, but taught him invaluable lessons. "I still have the hammer my father gave me when I was 12, he admitted, somewhat sheepishly. "It sits on my desk at home, reminds me where I came from." "I'd love to see it sometime," Lola said softly, reaching across the table to take his hand. That simple statement led to their third date, dinner at his penthouse, where Samuel showed her not just the hammer, but the architectural books. He'd studied at night while working construction during the day, the first set of blueprints he'd ever drawn, and the view of the city he'd helped shape. Lola brought her own stories, sharing photos of her family back in Georgetown, telling him about the traditional dances her mother had taught her, reciting snippets of poetry her father had loved. Each revelation, each shared memory, wove another thread in the tapestry of their growing connection. As autumn deepened into winter, they created their own traditions. Sunday brunches at a quiet cafe where they'd spend hours discussing everything from business strategy to childhood dreams. Evening walks through the arts district, where Lola would share her knowledge of architecture and design, seeing his buildings through fresh eyes. Late-night phone calls that started with, "I just wanted to hear your voice," and ended with reluctant goodbyes hours later. Their first argument came 3 months into their relationship over something trivial that neither would later remember. What they would remember was the reconciliation, how Samuel showed up at her office with a single red rose and a heartfelt apology, how Lola met him halfway with understanding and forgiveness. They learned then that their differences only made them stronger. that disagreement didn't mean discord, and that love meant choosing each other even in difficult moments. Christmas approached, bringing with it a magical transformation of the city. Samuel watched in delight as Lola's professional composure melted away at the sight of holiday decorations, her eyes lighting up like a child's at the first snowfall of the season. He found himself seeing the familiar through new eyes, rediscovering joy in simple pleasures he'd long taken for granted. On Christmas Eve, Samuel took Lola to the rooftop of his latest building project. The construction was complete, but the interior finishing hadn't begun, making it their private sanctuary above the city. He'd arranged for thousands of tiny lights to be strung across the temporary scaffolding, creating a ceiling of artificial stars. "I have something to show you," he said, leading her to the edge where a telescope had been set up. "Look there." He pointed to a particular spot in the city skyline. Lola peered through the telescope, gasping when she saw what he'd arranged. On the side of his first and most iconic building, lights had been programmed to spell out a simple question: "Marry me." When she turned back to him, tears shining in her eyes, she found Samuel on one knee, holding out a ring that captured starlight and hope in equal measure. It wasn't just a diamond. It was a custom design that incorporated elements of both their histories. The geometric precision of modern architecture combined with subtle curves reminiscent of Georgetown's colonial buildings. "Lola Rose," he began, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. "You walked into my life and showed me that all I'd built was just a foundation waiting for something real. You challenge me to be better, support me when I falter, and make every day brighter just by being in it. Will you marry me?" Her yes was barely a whisper, but it echoed in his heart like thunder. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, snow began to fall. The first white Christmas Dallas had seen in years. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the snowflakes dance in the light of their private constellation. The wedding planning became a blend of their cultures and personalities. They chose a spring date, when Dallas would be in full bloom. The ceremony would combine traditional elements from both their backgrounds, his American pragmatism, softened by her Guyanese heritage, all of it wrapped in the elegance they both appreciated. Their wedding day dawned clear and perfect, as if nature itself approved of their union. The ceremony was held in the botanical gardens, where tropical flowers imported from Guyana mingled with Texas wildflowers. Lola wore a gown that made Samuel forget how to breathe. Classic lines with subtle beading that caught the light like morning dew, and a train that seemed to float as she walked toward him. She carried a bouquet of roses and orchids, a representation of their two worlds coming together. But Samuel barely noticed the flowers, too captivated by the love shining in her eyes as she approached. Their vows were personal, written from the heart. Samuel spoke of building a life together stronger than any foundation he'd ever laid. Lola promised to be his partner in all things, to face whatever came their way as one. The reception was a celebration that would be talked about for years, not for its extravagance, though no expense had been spared, but for the palpable joy that filled the air. They danced their first dance to a song that blended classical strings with Caribbean rhythms, a musical representation of their union. As evening fell and the celebration continued around them, Samuel led Lola out onto a private balcony overlooking the garden. Above them, the first stars were appearing in the twilight sky. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. Lola leaned back against him, her wedding ring catching the last light of day. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she replied. "Though I do have one question." "Anything." She turned in his arms, looking up at him with a mixture of love and mischief. "Was spilling coffee really an accident that day?" Samuel's laughter joined the music floating out from the reception. "Let's just say I've never made a better strategic mistake in my life." As they rejoined their guests, Neither could know the challenges that lay ahead, but in that moment, surrounded by love and celebration, they were certain of one thing. Together, they could build something stronger than steel and glass, more lasting than any skyscraper. They were building a love story for the ages, foundation by foundation, day by day. Chapter 4. Paradise and Shadows. The Swiss Alps painted a majestic backdrop as Samuel and Lola's private helicopter descended toward the exclusive Gstaad Palace Hotel. Their honeymoon destination had been Samuel's surprise wedding gift. 3 weeks of luxury, adventure, and privacy in one of the world's most beautiful settings. As they touched down on the helipad, snow-capped peaks glittering in the morning sun, Lola's grip on his hand tightened with excitement. "It's like a fairy tale," she whispered, her breath fogging in the crisp mountain air as they stepped onto the landing pad. Samuel couldn't take his eyes off her, the way the wind caught her hair, the flush of joy on her cheeks, the sparkle of wonder in her hazel eyes. He'd seen this view dozens of times on business trips, but seeing it through her eyes made it entirely new. Their suite occupied the hotel's entire top floor, with panoramic windows that brought the mountains into every room. Samuel had arranged for it to be filled with Lola's favorite flowers, orchids from Guyana interspersed with Swiss edelweiss, creating a botanical bridge between their past and present. "Dance with me," he said suddenly, pulling her into his arms as they stood in the middle of their suite. There was no music playing, but they didn't need any. They moved to the rhythm of their shared heartbeats, the afternoon sun casting their shadows long across the polished floor. "I never thought I could be this happy," Lola murmured against his chest. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and discover it was all a dream." Samuel tilted her chin up, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "If it's a dream," he said softly, "then it's one we're sharing, and I never want to wake up." Those 3 weeks in Switzerland became the foundation of their married life, days filled with adventures and nights filled with intimate conversations and passionate discoveries. They skied on pristine slopes, Lola proving to be a natural despite never having seen snow before meeting Samuel, took helicopter tours of the Matterhorn, and found hidden cafes in charming mountain villages where they'd spend hours talking about their hopes for the future. One evening, as they sat in a cozy restaurant in Zermatt, Samuel watched Lola sampling Swiss chocolate with the same deliberate attention she once gave to marketing presentations. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, reaching across the table to brush a strand of hair from her face. She smiled, that special smile that seemed reserved just for him. "I'm thinking about how different our lives were a year ago, about all the little choices and moments that had to align perfectly to bring us together." She paused, taking a sip of wine. "And I'm thinking about all the moments yet to come." "Tell me about them," Samuel encouraged, fascinated as always by the way her mind worked. "I want to make our home feel like both of us, your modern aesthetic with touches of Caribbean warmth. I want to host dinner parties where we'll share stories and laughter with friends. I want to work together to make your company even more successful, but also to create a legacy that's about more than just buildings." Her eyes took on a dreamy quality. "And someday, I want to hear the patter of little feet running through our halls." Samuel's heart swelled at the vision she painted. "All of that," he promised. "Everything you dream of, we'll build it together." Returning to Dallas felt like stepping into a new world. Their penthouse, which Samuel had lived in for years, transformed under Lola's touch. She brought in rich textiles and vibrant art pieces from Guyana, mixing them seamlessly with the existing modern decor. The result was like their relationship, a perfect blend of different worlds creating something uniquely beautiful. Their first dinner party was a triumph. Lola arranged for a chef to prepare a fusion menu combining Caribbean and Texas flavors, while Samuel selected wines from his collection. Their guests, a mixture of business associates and close friends, were captivated by the warm atmosphere the couple created together. In the office, they maintained professional distance, but everyone could see how they elevated each other. Lola's marketing insights helped Peterborough construction reach new heights, while Samuel's business acumen helped her career soar. They were quickly becoming Dallas's most admired power couple, but in private moments, they were simply two people deeply in love. Their first anniversary approached like a growing symphony. Samuel spent weeks planning the perfect celebration, wanting to recreate the magic of their early days. He arranged for the Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date to be closed for a private dinner, complete with the same wine they'd shared that night. But 2 days before their anniversary, Lola felt the first whisper of what was to come. It started small, a slight dizziness as she stood up from her desk, a moment of weakness in her legs as she walked to a meeting. She dismissed it as stress, or perhaps the beginning of a cold. The morning of their anniversary, she woke to find Samuel watching her sleep, his face soft with love. "Happy anniversary, my heart," he whispered, presenting her with a small box containing a pendant that matched her engagement ring. They spent the day together playing hooky from work like teenagers. Samuel took her on a helicopter tour of the city, pointing out all their significant places. The coffee shop where they'd first really talked, the building where he'd proposed, the garden where they'd married. Lola loved seeing their story mapped out across the Dallas skyline, but by afternoon, the dizziness had returned stronger than before. At dinner, surrounded by candlelight and memories, she tried to ignore the growing fatigue in her limbs. Samuel was midway through a toast when he noticed her hand trembling as she reached for her water glass. "Lola?" Concern crept into his voice. "Are you all right?" She tried to smile, but the room had begun to spin slowly around her. "I just need some air," she managed to say, standing up. But her legs betrayed her, buckling beneath her weight. Samuel caught her before she could fall, his strong arms cradling her against his chest. "I'm taking you to the hospital," he said, his voice brooking no argument. As he carried her to the car, she wanted to protest that she was fine, that they shouldn't let anything spoil their perfect day, but the words wouldn't come, and the world was growing dim around the edges. The emergency room was a blur of bright lights and concerned voices. Samuel never left her side, his hand gripping hers as doctors ordered tests and nurses drew blood. Hours passed in a parade of medical terminology and worried glances. Finally, a doctor pulled them both into a private consultation room. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his serious face as he began to speak. "Mrs. Peterborough, we've found some concerning abnormalities in your test results. We'd like to admit you for further observation and testing." "What kind of abnormalities?" Samuel demanded, his businessman's directness taking over. But Lola could feel the slight tremor in his hand where it held hers. The doctor's explanation was filled with medical terms that seemed to float in the air like dust motes, none quite settling into understanding. Words like autoimmune response and neurological indicators hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. As the doctor continued talking, Lola found herself focusing instead on the steady beat of Samuel's heart, where her head rested against his chest. She thought about their perfect day, about all their plans and dreams, about the family they hoped to build. She thought about the strength they'd found in each other, never imagining they'd need to test its limits so soon. Later that night, as she lay in the hospital bed with monitors beeping softly around her, Samuel pulled his chair close and took her hand. In the dim light, his eyes shone with determination and love. "Whatever this is," he promised, his voice rough with emotion, "we'll face it together. I'll move heaven and earth to make you well again." Lola managed a small smile, squeezing his hand. I know you will, my love. You've already moved the Dallas skyline for me." As moonlight filtered through the hospital window, casting long shadows across the room, they held each other close, their hearts beating in sync. Neither spoke of the fear that had crept into their perfect world, but both felt it, a shadow at the edges of their happiness, a whisper of storms to come. Yet even in that moment of uncertainty, their love remained unshaken. Like the buildings Samuel raised from bare earth to touch the sky, their connection had foundations too deep to be easily moved. They had promised each other, for better or worse, never imagining the worse would come so soon. But as they faced this first real test of their vows, they would discover that true love doesn't just survive challenges, it grows stronger because of them. The night stretched long before them, filled with questions without answers and fears without names, but they faced it as they had faced everything since that first coffee-splashed meeting. Together, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating as one against whatever darkness might come. Chapter 5. Love's Deepest Test. Dawn crept into the hospital room, painting the walls in watercolor shades of pink and gold. Samuel hadn't slept, his eyes never leaving Lola's face as she dozed fitfully between nurse visits and blood draws. The businessman who could solve any problem with enough money and determination was facing his first true helplessness, and it terrified him. Dr. Marcus Bennett, the neurologist assigned to Lola's case, arrived early that morning. His reputation preceded him, one of the top specialists in the country, known for solving medical mysteries that left other doctors baffled. Samuel had made some calls during the night, pulling strings to get the best possible care for his wife. "Mrs. Peterborough," Dr. Bennett began, his voice gentle but professional as he reviewed her chart. "I've looked over your initial test results, and I believe we're dealing with something quite complex here. We'll need to run a comprehensive series of tests to understand exactly what we're facing." Lola nodded, her hand tightening in Samuel's. She was sitting up in bed now, her natural grace somehow intact despite the hospital gown and IV lines. "Please, call me Lola," she said softly, "and tell me everything. I need to understand what's happening to my body." What followed was a week of tests that seemed endless. MRIs that filled the air with mechanical hammering, spinal taps that left Lola in tears despite her brave face, blood draws that turned the crook of her arm purple with bruising. Through it all, Samuel remained her constant, unwavering support. He converted her hospital room into a makeshift office, conducting business via laptop and phone while never leaving her side. His assistant Margaret coordinated with the hospital staff to ensure Lola had everything she could want. Fresh flowers daily, her favorite books, silk pajamas instead of hospital gowns, gourmet meals instead of hospital food. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the window and caught the diamond pendant he'd given her for their anniversary, Lola watched Samuel pacing the room during a business call. His voice was firm, authoritative, the voice that closed million-dollar deals, but his free hand never stopped stroking her hair. "You don't have to stay here every minute," she said when he hung up. "The business needs you." Samuel sat on the edge of her bed, taking both her hands in his. "You are my business now," he said simply. "Everything else can wait." The diagnosis, when it finally came, felt like a blow to the chest. Dr. Bennett sat them down in his office, the Dallas skyline visible through the window behind him. The same skyline Samuel had helped build, now seeming like it belonged to another life entirely. "It's an extremely rare autoimmune condition," the doctor explained, his words careful and measured. "Your immune system is essentially attacking your nervous system, particularly affecting motor function and muscle control. The good news is that we caught it relatively early. The challenging news is that treatment will be complex." Samuel leaned forward, his business instincts kicking in. What do we need? Specialists? Equipment? Research? Whatever it costs, whatever it takes, just tell me. Dr. Bennett spread his hands. Mr. Peterborough, I understand your desire to fix this quickly, but we're dealing with something that requires time and patience. We'll start with an aggressive course of immunosuppressants and physical therapy, but you need to understand, this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. That night, back in Lola's hospital room, they held each other in silence. The city lights twinkled beyond the window, stars replaced by the artificial constellation of office buildings and construction cranes. Samuel felt Lola trembling slightly in his arms and pulled back to look at her face. "Talk to me, my love," he whispered. "Tell me what you're thinking." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she met his gaze. "I'm thinking about all our plans, all our dreams, children, travel, building our life together. I'm thinking about how unfair it is to tie you to someone who might become a burden." Samuel's heart clenched at her words. With infinite tenderness, he wiped away her tears with his thumbs. "Lola Rose Peterborough, listen to me very carefully. You are not and never could be a burden. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Whatever comes next, we face it together. But what if I can't walk? What if I can't dance with you anymore? What if—" He silenced her with a gentle kiss. "Then I'll carry you. I'll be your legs, your strength, whatever you need. Do you remember what I said in my wedding vows? I promised to build a life with you stronger than any foundation I've ever laid. That promise doesn't change because the blueprints look different now." The treatment began immediately. The immunosuppressants left Lola nauseated and weak, but she faced each day with determination. Physical therapy sessions were grueling, often leaving her in tears of frustration and pain, but she never quit. Samuel arranged for the best therapists to come to their penthouse, converting one of the spare rooms into a fully equipped rehabilitation space. Their home transformed to accommodate Lola's changing needs. Samuel installed support bars in the bathroom, bought specialized equipment to help with daily tasks, and hired a full-time nurse to assist when he couldn't be there. But more importantly, he made sure their space remained beautiful, refusing to let it feel like a medical facility. One morning, about a month into treatment, Lola woke to find rose petals scattered across their bedroom floor. Samuel had recreated their wedding night, complete with the special blend of flowers they'd used in her bouquet. "We might be fighting a battle," he told her, "but that doesn't mean we can't still dance." He helped her out of bed, supporting most of her weight as they swayed gently to their wedding song. Lola's legs were weak, her balance uncertain, but in Samuel's arms she felt as graceful as ever. They moved slowly, carefully, but with all the love that had brought them together. There were bad days, of course. Days when the medication seemed to drain all color from the world, when simple tasks became mountainous challenges, when hope felt as fragile as morning frost. On those days, Samuel would read to her from the poetry books her father had loved, his voice steady and sure even when hers trembled with fatigue. "I never thought it would be like this," Lola admitted during one particularly difficult evening. Her hands had been shaking too badly to hold her fork at dinner, and frustration had finally overwhelmed her usual grace. "I'm supposed to be your partner, not your patient." Samuel set aside the dinner he'd been helping her with and took her face in his hands. "You are my partner, my wife, my love. Nothing else matters. But you've had to put everything on hold, the business, your life. Do you remember what you told me that day in the coffee shop?" he asked. "You said being professional isn't always the most important thing. Well, this is me choosing what's important. You, United States. Everything else is just details." As weeks turned into months, they developed new routines. Samuel learned to anticipate her needs before she voiced them, becoming as skilled at helping her with daily tasks as he was at negotiating contracts. Lola fought her battle with quiet determination, celebrating small victories and refusing to let setbacks defeat her. Dr. Bennett continued to adjust her treatment, trying different combinations of medications to find the perfect balance. Some days were better than others, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, they began to see progress. First, it was steadier hands, then stronger steps, then moments of the old energy returning to her eyes. One Saturday morning, Samuel woke to find Lola's side of the bed empty. Panic flared until he heard soft music coming from their balcony. He found her there, doing her physical therapy exercises on her own, the rising sun painting her in shades of gold and promise. "You're supposed to wait for help with those," he said, but his voice was full of pride. She turned to him, sweat glistening on her forehead, but triumph shining in her eyes. "I wanted to prove to myself that I could. Besides," she added with a hint of her old mischief, "I had a feeling my ever-vigilant husband would appear just when I needed him." Samuel wrapped his arms around her waist, supporting her tired muscles as they watched the sun rise over their city. They had no way of knowing then that this moment marked a turning point, that the worst was behind them. But they knew, with the certainty of hearts that beat as one, that whatever came next, their love would be enough to face it. The shadow that had fallen across their perfect world hadn't destroyed them. It had revealed the true strength of their foundation. Like the buildings Samuel raised against the Texas sky, their love had been tested by storms and emerged stronger, reaching ever higher toward the light. Chapter 6. Autumn's Whispers. September painted Dallas in shades of gold and crimson as autumn settled over the city. 6 months had passed since Lola's diagnosis, and while the journey hadn't been easy, they'd found a rhythm in their new normal. The morning sun streamed through their penthouse windows, catching the flash of copper highlights in Lola's hair as she moved through her morning exercises with growing confidence. Samuel watched her from the doorway of their home gym, coffee cups in hand. She'd insisted on resuming her independence as much as possible, though he still found himself hovering nearby, ready to step in if needed. The way she held herself had changed. There was a new kind of strength in her posture, born not of physical power, but of unwavering determination. "I can feel you watching me," she said, without turning around, a smile in her voice. "Are you going to stand there all morning with my coffee, or do I have to come get it myself?" He crossed the room, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple as he handed her the cup. "Just admiring the view. You're getting stronger every day." She hummed, taking a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee. "Strong enough to have a serious conversation about work." Samuel's heart skipped a beat. They hadn't discussed her returning to work since the illness began. He'd kept her position open, of course, but had been careful not to pressure her about it. "Are you sure you're ready?" Lola set down her coffee cup and turned to face him fully. "I'm not talking about going back full-time, not yet, but I've been thinking, all those marketing proposals I helped develop, they're just sitting there, gathering dust. I could work from home, start small, maybe just a few hours a day." The hope in her eyes was impossible to resist. "Whatever you want to try, I'm with you, but promise me you won't push too hard." She reached up to cup his cheek, her touch still the softest thing he'd ever known. "I promise. Besides, I have a rather vigilant husband who I'm sure will make sure I don't overdo it." That evening, they sat together on their balcony, reviewing marketing materials as the sun set over the city. Lola's mind was as sharp as ever, picking up exactly where she'd left off months ago. Samuel found himself falling in love all over again, watching her work. The way she bit her lower lip when concentrating, the elegant sweep of her hand as she made notes in the margins. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "Nothing. Everything." You. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Sometimes I forget to tell you how extraordinary you are. A slight blush colored her cheeks. Flatterer. You're just trying to distract me from pointing out the flaws in this proposal. Is it working? Her laugh, rich and genuine, floated out over the city lights. Always. As autumn deepened, they settled into new patterns. Mornings were for therapy and exercise, afternoons for work, strictly limited to 4 hours as per their agreement, and evenings were theirs alone. They rediscovered the joy of simple pleasures, cooking together in their kitchen, reading side by side in their library, planning future projects with renewed hope. But shadows still lingered at the edges of their happiness. Some days, Lola's hands would shake too much to hold a pen. Other days, fatigue would crash over her like a wave, forcing her to rest for hours. Samuel learned to read the signs, to anticipate when she needed rest before she would admit it herself. One particularly difficult afternoon, he found her in their home office, frustrated tears in her eyes as she struggled to type on her laptop. Without a word, he sat beside her and began to massage her trembling hands, working out the tension in each finger with gentle pressure. "I hate this," she whispered. "I hate that some days I can't even do the simplest things." "Then let me be your hands," he said softly. "Tell me what you want to write, and I'll type it for you." For the next 2 hours, they worked as one, Lola dictating her thoughts while Samuel transcribed them, adding his own insights when asked. It became another kind of intimacy, this sharing of work and words, this way of supporting each other that went beyond physical care. As November approached, bringing with it the first real chill of the season, Dr. Bennett called with cautiously optimistic news. Lola's latest test results showed improvement, small but significant changes that suggested the treatment was working. The doctor warned them not to expect miracles, but for the first time in months, they could see a light at the end of the tunnel. They celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, Samuel cooking Lola's favorite Caribbean dishes while she supervised from her perch at the kitchen island. The spices filled their home with warmth and memory, reminding them of simpler times while somehow making the present moment even more precious. "Dance with me?" Samuel asked when dinner was finished, extending his hand with a formal bow that made her laugh. "Always," she answered, taking his hand and letting him pull her close. They swayed together in their kitchen, the city lights twinkling beyond their windows like earthbound stars. Lola's steps were slower than they used to be, more careful, but there was a grace in their modified dance that spoke of deep love and deeper understanding. "I've been thinking," she said, her head resting against his chest, "about Christmas." Samuel's heart clenched slightly. Their first Christmas as a married couple had been spent in the hospital. He'd tried to make it special, decorating her room with tiny lights and bringing in a small tree, but it hadn't been the celebration they'd dreamed of. "What about Christmas?" he asked carefully. "I want to host a proper Christmas party this year. Nothing too elaborate, just close friends, good food, maybe some caroling. I want to fill this home with light and music and laughter." Samuel pulled back slightly to look at her face, searching for any sign of doubt or overextension. What he saw instead was determination and joy, the spark that had first drawn him to her burning bright in her eyes. "Are you sure? It would be a lot of work." "Which is why I have you," she smiled, reaching up to trace his jawline with gentle fingers. "Besides, I think we need this, to show ourselves and everyone else that life goes on, that love wins." He couldn't argue with that logic, nor did he want to. "Then we'll have the best Christmas party Dallas has ever seen." The next few weeks were filled with careful planning. They hired the best caterers in the city, ordered decorations that would transform their penthouse into a winter wonderland, and sent out invitations to their closest friends and business associates. Samuel watched Lola come alive with the planning, her natural talent for organization and detail shining through despite her physical limitations. But as November drew to a close, a new shadow fell across their carefully constructed world. It started small, a missed call here, a late-night text there. Samuel's business was expanding, demanding more of his attention. A major project in Houston was facing difficulties, requiring frequent video conferences and lengthy phone calls. Lola noticed, of course. She saw the way tension gathered in his shoulders, the way he checked his phone more frequently, the way worry lines appeared between his brows. But she said nothing, understanding the demands of the business world they both inhabited. One evening, as they sat reviewing party plans, Samuel's phone buzzed for the 10th time in an hour. The caller ID showed a name Lola didn't recognize, Gretchen Thomas, project manager. "You should take it," she said softly, seeing the conflict in his eyes. "It might be important." Samuel hesitated, then declined the call. "Nothing is more important than this, than us." But they both felt it, the first whisper of change in the air, like the breath of winter stealing through a crack in a window. As they continued their planning, neither spoke of the growing pile of work on Samuel's desk or the increasing frequency of calls from the Houston project team. The Christmas party was 3 weeks away, and while their love remained as strong as ever, new challenges were gathering on the horizon like storm clouds. Yet they held each other close, choosing to believe that whatever came next, their foundation was strong enough to weather any storm. What they couldn't know as they sat together in their warm, well-lit home was that the real test of their love was still to come. But for now they had each other, they had hope, and they had a future bright with possibilities stretching out before them like the glittering Dallas skyline. Chapter 7. Winter's Chill. December arrived in Dallas with an unseasonable cold snap that turned rain into delicate sheets of ice across the city's glass towers. From their penthouse windows, Lola watched the crystalline formations with a mixture of wonder and unease. The weather seemed to mirror the subtle change she felt in the air of their home, a creeping chill she couldn't quite name. Samuel's days had grown longer, his nights shorter. The Houston project, a massive development that would reshape the city's downtown, had encountered serious complications. Environmental concerns, permit issues, and construction delays had created a perfect storm of problems that required his constant attention. "Just a few more weeks," he promised one evening, kissing her temple as he prepared to leave for yet another late-night video conference. "Once we get past these regulatory hurdles, things will calm down." Lola smiled and nodded, but something in her heart whispered that it wouldn't be that simple. She'd been in the business world long enough to know that projects like this had a way of consuming everything in their path. The Christmas party preparations continued, giving her a welcome distraction. She'd thrown herself into the planning with renewed energy, determined to create the perfect celebration. Their penthouse was slowly transforming into a winter wonderland, with elegant decorations that blended her Caribbean heritage with traditional holiday themes. It was during one of the planning sessions with their event coordinator that Lola first heard the name that would change everything. "Ms. Thomas from the Houston office called earlier," Margaret, Samuel's assistant, mentioned casually. "She wanted to confirm she's on the guest list for the party, something about needing to discuss the project with Mr. Peterborough in person." "Ms. Thomas?" Lola asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "Gretchen Thomas, the new project manager," Margaret explained. "She's been handling the Houston development. Quite impressive, actually. Youngest female project manager in the company's history." Later that evening, curiosity got the better of her. While Samuel was on another late call, Lola opened her laptop and searched for Gretchen Thomas on the company's internal network. The photo that appeared made her heart skip a beat. Gretchen was stunning, tall and elegantly beautiful, with confident green eyes and a smile that suggested she was used to getting what she wanted. Her biography listed impressive credentials: MBA from Harvard, fast-track promotions, a string of successful projects. But it was the candid office photos that caught Lola's attention. Gretchen standing next to Samuel at project meetings, both of them bent over blueprints, their heads close together as they discussed details. A familiar tremor ran through Lola's hands as she closed the laptop, but this time it wasn't from her illness. She tried to push away the whisper of insecurity that crept into her mind. Samuel loved her. Their bond had only grown stronger through her illness, and yet the next morning she woke to find Samuel already dressed for work, pacing the bedroom while on his phone. "I understand the urgency, Gretchen," he was saying, his voice low and intense. "I'll fly down today. We can go over the environmental impact reports in person." Lola sat up slowly, and Samuel's eyes met hers with a flash of guilt. He quickly ended the call. "I'm sorry, love, did I wake you? You're going to Houston." She hated how small her voice sounded. Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hands in his. "Just for the day. There are some issues that need my personal attention. I'll be back tonight. We have the final tasting for the party menu, remember?" She nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course. Give them hell in Houston." He kissed her softly, his lips lingering against hers, as if trying to convey everything he couldn't say. Then he was gone, leaving behind only the fading scent of his cologne and the echo of her doubts. The day stretched endlessly before her. Lola threw herself into party preparations, reviewing place settings and finalizing the music playlist. But her mind kept wandering to Houston, imagining Samuel and Gretchen bent over documents together, sharing the easy camaraderie of people who spoke the same language of business and ambition. Evening came, but Samuel didn't. A text arrived instead. "Environmental review running long. Have to stay overnight. Rain check on the tasting. I'm so sorry." Lola stared at the message until the words blurred. She thought about calling him, but stopped herself. What would she say? That she was jealous of a woman she'd never met? That she feared her illness had created a gap in their marriage that someone else might fill? Instead, she went to their closet and pulled out one of his sweaters, wrapping herself in its familiar comfort. The mirrors that lined the closet walls reflected her image back at her, still beautiful, but changed. Months of illness had left their mark, adding a fragility to her frame that hadn't been there before. "Stop it," she told her reflection firmly. "You're being ridiculous." But as she lay alone in their big bed that night, watching ice patterns form on the windows, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting in their carefully rebuilt world. The woman who had faced down her illness with unwavering courage now found herself afraid of shadows she couldn't name. Morning brought a fresh wave of snow and Samuel's return. He arrived bearing gifts, a small box of pralines from her favorite Houston chocolatier and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "How did the meetings go?" she asked over breakfast, studying his face for signs of what? She wasn't sure. "Productive," he answered, his attention on his phone. "Gretchen, Ms. Thomas, has some innovative ideas for addressing the environmental concerns. She'll be coming to Dallas next week to present them to the board." Lola's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Next week? But that's the week of the party." "Is it?" Samuel looked up, genuine surprise crossing his face. "We can reschedule the presentation." "No," Lola cut him off, managing a smile. "It's fine. Business is business, after all." The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Samuel's phone buzzed constantly, with messages from Houston, Lola pretended not to notice that many came late at night or early in the morning. She threw herself into physical therapy with renewed determination, pushing herself harder than her doctors recommended. One afternoon, she overheard Samuel's end of a phone conversation that made her blood run cold. "You're right," he was saying, his voice warm with amusement. "It would be easier to discuss in person. Dinner tomorrow? I know a quiet place where we won't be interrupted." Lola's hands shook as she gripped her walker, but she forced herself to keep moving, to maintain her exercises. She wouldn't let weakness claim her now, wouldn't give in to the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Samuel seemed distracted, distant. When he kissed her goodnight, Lola held him a moment longer than usual, breathing in his familiar scent, trying to memorize the feel of him in her arms. "I love you," she whispered. "Love you too," he replied automatically, already reaching for his phone to check one last email. As she drifted off to sleep, Lola thought about the Christmas party, now just days away. She'd planned it as a celebration of their love, their resilience, their triumph over adversity. Now she wondered if it would instead become the setting for their greatest test yet. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was the ice on the windows, spreading in delicate fractal patterns that looked almost like tears in the moonlight. Outside, the December wind whistled through the steel canyons of Dallas, carrying with it the promise of storms to come. Chapter 8. Frost and Fire. The evening of Samuel's dinner meeting arrived with a bitter wind that sent Christmas decorations dancing in shop windows across Dallas. Lola stood in their master bedroom, watching her husband adjust his tie in the mirror, the same cobalt blue tie she'd given him for his birthday. He'd worn it to every important meeting since, calling it his lucky charm. "You don't have to go," she said softly, their eyes meeting in the mirror's reflection. "We could order in, review the party details together." Samuel's hands paused on his tie. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Hesitation, perhaps regret. Then his business mask slipped back into place. "This meeting is crucial for the Houston project. Gretchen has some innovative solutions that could save us months of delays." Gretchen. The casual use of her first name hung in the air between them. Lola moved to help him with his tie, her fingers only trembling slightly as she smoothed the silk. "The famous Gretchen Thomas. I feel like I know her already, as much as you talk about her ideas." "You'll meet her at the party," Samuel said, catching her hands and pressing a quick kiss to her knuckles. "I think you'll like her. She reminds me a bit of you, actually. Same sharp mind for business." The comparison stung more than Lola expected. "Before or after I got sick?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Samuel's face softened with concern. "Lola, don't. You know that's not—" "I'm sorry," she cut him off, forcing a smile. "That wasn't fair. Go. Have your meeting. Just don't be too late." He kissed her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. "I'll be home before you know it. Take your evening medication and get some rest." After he left, Lola stood at their bedroom window, watching his car disappear into the city traffic. The Christmas lights of downtown Dallas blurred through unshed tears, creating halos of color in the gathering darkness. She thought about following his suggestion to rest, but restlessness drove her to movement instead. She made her way carefully through their penthouse, one hand trailing along the walls for support. The Christmas decorations were nearly complete. Garlands draped elegantly across mantels, tiny white lights twinkling like earthbound stars, the massive tree in their living room waiting for its final ornaments. Everything was perfect, just as she'd planned. So why did it all feel like it was slipping away? In their home office, her laptop sat open to the company's internal network. Before she could stop herself, she typed Gretchen Thomas into the search bar again. New photos had been added since her last search. Project updates from Houston, showing Gretchen presenting to the board, her confidence radiating through even the still images. In one photo, she stood next to Samuel, both of them laughing at some shared joke. They looked right together, professional, powerful, whole. Lola closed the laptop with more force than necessary, her hands shaking now, not from weakness, but from emotion. She made her way to their bathroom, staring at her reflection in the harsh vanity lights. The woman who looked back at her was still beautiful, but changed. Months of illness had left shadows under her eyes that no amount of concealer could fully hide. Her curves, once softly feminine, had sharpened with weight loss. Even her hair, though still glossy, had lost some of its bounce. "Stop it," she told her reflection firmly. "You're working yourself up over nothing." But was it nothing? The late-night phone calls, the constant texts, the way Samuel's face lit up when discussing Gretchen's innovative ideas. Lola had been in business long enough to know how these things could start. A shared project, long hours, the adrenaline of problem-solving together. It could create a connection that blurred professional lines before anyone realized what was happening. Her phone buzzed with a text from Samuel. "Meeting running long. Don't wait up." Lola set the phone down carefully, too carefully, her movements deliberate as she fought against the urge to throw it across the room. Instead, she made her way to their kitchen, her steps measured and slow. The medication she was supposed to take with dinner sat accusingly on the counter, but she ignored it. She needed a clear head tonight. The hours crept by like molasses. Lola tried to distract herself with party planning details, but every decision seemed to loop back to the same questions. Would Samuel and Gretchen dance together at the party? Would everyone see what Lola saw in those photos, how perfectly they matched? Would they notice the contrast between Gretchen's vital energy and Lola's careful movements? Near midnight, she heard the elevator doors open. Samuel's footsteps in the hallway were slightly unsteady. Drinks with dinner, then. He entered their bedroom to find her sitting in the armchair by the window, still fully dressed. "You're still up," he said, surprise and something like guilt coloring his voice. "I told you not to wait." "How was your meeting?" Lola asked quietly, proud of how steady she kept her voice. "Productive. Gretchen's environmental proposal is brilliant. She's found a way to turn the wetlands issue into an asset rather than a liability." His voice took on the animated tone it always did when discussing the project. "We're thinking of incorporating a nature preserve into the development plan. It would add costs up front, but the long-term benefits—" Lola interrupted softly. "Or Gretchen?" Samuel paused in loosening his tie, finally seeming to notice the tension in the room. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Everything." Lola stood carefully, using the chair for support. "Do you know you've said her name 12 times today? I counted." "Lola." He stepped toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Your tie is crooked," she observed. "It wasn't when you left. And there's lipstick on your collar. Very faint. Someone might have brushed against you while talking closely. Coral pink. Professional enough for a business dinner, wouldn't you say?" Samuel's hand went to his collar automatically. "It's not what you're thinking. We were reviewing blueprints, leaning over the table." "Don't." Lola's voice cracked slightly. "Please don't insult us both by pretending there's nothing happening here." "Nothing is happening." Samuel ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Gretchen is a colleague, nothing more. You're letting your imagination run wild." "Am I? Then why do you light up every time your phone buzzes with her messages? Why are you working later and later? Why can't you talk about anything else lately except her brilliant ideas?" "Because it's work," he was almost shouting now. "Important work that needs my attention. Work I've been neglecting for months because—" He stopped abruptly, but the unfinished sentence hung in the air between them. Because of me, Lola finished quietly. Because of my illness. Because I became a burden instead of a partner. I never said that. Samuel's voice softened as he moved toward her again. I never even thought it. You didn't have to. Lola stepped back, maintaining the distance between them. I see it in your eyes sometimes, the frustration, the restlessness. You're used to fixing problems, making things happen. But you can't fix me, Samuel. And while you've been trying, Gretchen Thomas swept in with her perfect health and her brilliant ideas and her coral pink lipstick. That's enough. Samuel's voice was firm but gentle. Come to bed. You're tired. You're not thinking clearly. Actually, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. Lola moved toward the door, her steps careful but determined. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. I think we both need some space to think. Lola, please, the party is in 3 days. She cut him off. We'll get through it together, put on a good show for everyone. After that... She left the sentence unfinished, disappearing into the hallway before he could see the tears that had finally escaped. In the guest room, Lola laid awake listening to Samuel moving around their bedroom. She waited for him to come after her, to explain everything away, to prove her fears. Unfounded, but the night stretched on in silence, broken only by the occasional buzz of his phone on the nightstand down the hall. Outside, the December wind howled around the building's corners, and the Christmas lights of Dallas twinkled mockingly through the window. Somewhere in the city, Lola knew, Gretchen Thomas was probably still awake too, perhaps reviewing those brilliant proposals, perhaps thinking about dinner with Samuel. And in that moment, in the darkness of the guest room, Lola began to form a plan, one that would either save her marriage or end it completely. Chapter 9. The night before Christmas. The day before the Christmas party dawned cold and clear, sunlight sparkling off frost-covered windows like scattered diamonds. Lola had spent the last 2 nights in the guest room, each evening telling herself she would return to their bed, each night finding reasons to stay away. The distance between them had grown from emotional to physical, and neither seemed to know how to bridge it. Samuel had tried in his way. There were fresh flowers every morning, her favorite pastries from the French bakery downtown, little notes left where she would find them. But he was still working late, still constantly on his phone, still mentioning Gretchen's name in every other conversation. It was as if he couldn't see how each casual reference to the Houston project manager was another crack in their foundation. That morning, Lola sat at her vanity, studying her reflection as she prepared for the final day of party preparations. The face that looked back at her was composed, serene even, giving no hint of the storm raging beneath the surface. She had made her decision during those sleepless nights in the guest room, and now everything was in place. Her phone buzzed with a message from their housekeeper, Maria. Everything arranged as requested, Mrs. Peterborough. The car will be ready at midnight. Lola deleted the message immediately, her hands steady for the first time in days. The plan was simple, really. She would attend the party, play the perfect hostess, give everyone the Christmas celebration they expected. Then, while the party was still in full swing, she would slip away quietly. Her letter was already written, sealed in an envelope on her desk. By the time Samuel read it, she would be gone. The irony wasn't lost on her, using Christmas Eve for her departure, just as she had once used it for their engagement. But there was a symmetry to it that appealed to her sense of narrative. Their love story had begun on a Christmas Eve. It seemed fitting that it should end on one as well. Lola, Samuel's voice called from the hallway. The florist is here with the final delivery. Do you want to check the arrangements? Coming, she replied, taking one last look in the mirror before standing. She moved carefully but confidently. Weeks of determined physical therapy had improved her stability, though she still kept a hand near the wall for support. The penthouse had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Crystal garlands caught the morning light, scattering rainbows across the walls. The massive Christmas tree dominated the living room, its ornaments telling the story of their relationship, the little coffee cup that commemorated their first meeting, the miniature Swiss chalet from their honeymoon, the delicate glass snowflake from their engagement night. Samuel stood amid a forest of poinsettias and white roses, directing the florists with the same attention to detail he brought to his construction projects. He looked tired, Lola noticed, with shadows under his eyes that matched her own. When he saw her, his face softened with the smile that had first won her heart. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing to the displays. "I added extra orchids. I know how much you love them." The gesture touched her heart, even as it strengthened her resolve. This was Samuel, thoughtful, caring, always trying to make her happy. But it wasn't enough anymore, not when she could see him slipping away despite his best intentions. "They're perfect," she said softly. "Everything is perfect." He moved toward her then, reaching for her hand, but she turned away under the pretense of adjusting a flower arrangement. She couldn't risk him touching her now. Her determination might crumble under the familiar comfort of his touch. "The guest list is confirmed at 80 people, she continued briskly, keeping her voice professional. "The caterers will arrive at 4, the string quartet at 6. The first guests are expected at 7. "Lola," Samuel's voice held a note of pleading, "can we talk, really talk? These past few nights—" "We should focus on the party," she interrupted. "There's still so much to do." She moved toward the kitchen, where the event planner was waiting with questions about the champagne service. The day passed in a blur of last-minute details and careful avoidance. Lola threw herself into the preparations, checking every detail twice, making sure everything would be perfect. It would be her last gift to him, this perfect Christmas party, this final illusion of their perfect life. At 4 o'clock, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Gretchen Thomas. "Looking forward to finally meeting you tonight. Samuel speaks so highly of you." Lola stared at the message until the words blurred. The casual use of his first name, the friendly exclamation point, the implied intimacy of shared conversations about her. It was all too much. She deleted this message too, adding it to the growing pile of things she was trying to forget. As evening approached, she retreated to their bedroom, his bedroom now, she supposed, to prepare. She had chosen her dress weeks ago, before everything started falling apart. It was a deep emerald green that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes, cut to flatter her still recovering figure while hiding its new fragility. The necklace Samuel had given her for their anniversary lay in its box on the dresser, but she left it there. Tonight, she would wear her mother's old pendant instead, something from her past to carry her into her future. The sound of the shower running in the master bathroom told her Samuel was getting ready too. Once, they would have prepared for parties together, sharing the space with comfortable intimacy. Now she waited until the water stopped before entering to do her makeup, carefully timing their movements to avoid contact. At 6:30, she stood in their living room, doing one final check of the decorations. The tree lights twinkled like stars, the ornaments casting dancing reflections on the walls. Outside, the Dallas skyline was already lit up for Christmas, a man-made constellation that had once represented all their dreams. "You look beautiful." She turned to find Samuel in the doorway, handsome in his tuxedo, his eyes soft with something that might have been regret. He was wearing the watch she'd given him last Christmas, she noticed, and the cobalt blue tie that now carried too many meanings. "Thank you," she replied quietly. "You look nice too." He took a step toward her. "Lola, before everyone arrives, I need to tell you—" The elevator chimed, announcing the arrival of the first guests. Lola stepped back, straightening her shoulders. "It's time," she said, moving toward the foyer. "Remember to greet the Chamber of Commerce president first. He always expects it." The party began, and Lola slipped into her role as hostess with practiced ease. She smiled and chatted, made introductions, and ensured everyone's glasses stayed full. If anyone noticed the careful distance she maintained from Samuel, they were too polite to mention it. At 8 o'clock, Gretchen Thomas arrived. She was even more stunning in person, tall and elegant in a red dress that perfectly suited her confident bearing. When Samuel introduced them, Lola shook her hand with a smile that never reached her eyes. "I feel like I know you already," Gretchen said warmly. "Samuel talks about you constantly." "How interesting," Lola replied, her voice honey-sweet. "He talks about you constantly too." She watched them throughout the evening, noting the easy way they fell into conversation, the subtle mirroring of body language, the shared looks of understanding when business topics came up. They looked right together, these two powerful, healthy, ambitious people. They made sense in a way that Lola and Samuel no longer did. As midnight approached, she began her final preparations. A quiet word with Maria confirmed that her suitcase had been smuggled down to the waiting car. Her passport and the letter were in her evening bag. Everything was ready. She made one last circuit of the party, saying goodbye without anyone realizing that's what she was doing. She paused at the Christmas tree, touching the coffee cup ornament one last time, remembering the day it all began. The clock began to strike midnight. In the crowd of party guests, she saw Samuel and Gretchen standing close together, examining something on his phone. Neither noticed as Lola slipped quietly toward the private elevator that would take her away from everything she had built, everything she had loved, everything she had lost. As the elevator doors closed on her old life, a single tear escaped, tracking down her cheek like a fallen star. The descent began, each floor taking her further from the man she loved and the life they had shared, carrying her toward an uncertain future that she would face alone. Chapter 10. Shattered Christmas. The party continued in full swing, crystal glasses catching the light like trapped stars, laughter and music weaving through the penthouse air. Samuel stood near the Christmas tree, half listening to Gretchen's enthusiastic description of their latest breakthrough on the Houston project. Something felt off, a disturbance in the careful rhythm of the evening that he couldn't quite identify. "Samuel," Gretchen's voice cut through his distraction. "Are you listening? This could solve all our permit issues." "Have you seen Lola?" he asked suddenly, scanning the crowded room. "I haven't noticed her for a while." Gretchen's expression flickered slightly, disappointment, annoyance. "She was by the bar earlier. I'm sure she's just attending to hosting duties." But Samuel was already moving through the crowd, a growing unease propelling him forward. The last time he'd seen Lola, she'd been standing near the tree, her emerald dress catching the light in a way that reminded him of their first Christmas together. How long ago had that been? 20 minutes? An hour? Maria, their housekeeper, was arranging fresh towels in the guest bathroom. Something in her expression made Samuel pause. "Maria, where's Mrs. Peterborough?" The older woman wouldn't meet his eyes. "I haven't seen her, sir," she said, but her hands twisted nervously in her apron. Samuel's heart began to race. He made his way to their bedroom, hoping to find Lola resting. Her stamina still wasn't what it used to be. The room was empty, the bed untouched, but something was different. He stood in the doorway, his trained eye for detail taking in the subtle changes. Her perfume bottle was missing from the vanity. The drawer where she kept her passport was slightly ajar, and there, on her desk, a cream-colored envelope bearing his name in her elegant handwriting. His hands trembled as he opened it, the paper crisp and formal, like a business document rather than a love letter. The words swam before his eyes. My dearest Samuel, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Please don't try to find me. This is the kindest thing I can do for both of us. I've watched you these past months, seeing the toll my illness has taken not just on my body, but on our dreams. You've been perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. So careful with my feelings, so determined to be strong for both of us. But in being strong, you've had to deny your own needs, your own right to a full and unencumbered life. I see how alive you are when discussing the Houston project, how energized you become when sharing ideas with Gretchen. She challenges you in ways I no longer can. She's your equal in the world you inhabit now, while I've become a reminder of limitations and compromise. Don't blame yourself, and please, don't blame her. This isn't about betrayal. It's about letting go before bitterness can poison the beautiful love we've shared. I want you to remember us as we were that first Christmas Eve, full of dreams and possibilities, not as we've become, careful and distant, tiptoeing around unspoken truths. I'm returning to Georgetown, to my family's home. By the time you read this, I'll be well on my way. I've instructed my lawyers to make the divorce as simple as possible. All I ask is that you don't fight it. Let me give you this final gift, your freedom to find happiness without guilt. Remember the coffee shop where we first really talked? How you deliberately spilled your drink just to have an excuse to speak with me? That's how I want to remember us. Brave enough to risk everything for love. Now I'm being brave again, loving you enough to let you go. Be happy, my darling. Build your dreams with someone who can stand beside you without leaning on you. Create the future you deserve. All my love, Lola. Samuel read the letter 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. The party sounds filtered through the closed door like music from another world, a world that had made sense just minutes ago. He burst out of the bedroom, the letter crushed in his fist. Maria! His voice carried over the party noise, causing heads to turn. The housekeeper appeared, her face a mask of carefully composed sympathy. "When?" he demanded. "When did she leave?" "At midnight, sir, just as she planned." Planned? The word felt like ash in his mouth. "How long has she been planning this?" "A few days, sir. She made me promise not to tell you until 6 in the morning. Said she didn't want to ruin your Christmas party." Maria's voice cracked slightly. She looked so sad, Mr. Peterborough, but so determined. The room began to spin. Samuel gripped the nearest wall for support, barely noticing as Gretchen appeared at his side. "Samuel, what's wrong? You look terrible." He turned to her, seeing her clearly for the first time, seeing how his friendly attention to her must have looked to Lola, understanding too late the damage his thoughtlessness had caused. "She's gone," he whispered. "Lola's gone. She thinks I'm in love with you." Gretchen stepped back, genuine shock crossing her features. "What? But that's ridiculous. We've only ever been colleagues." "Haven't we?" Samuel asked bitterly. "All those late-night calls, the dinners to discuss the project, the way I light up talking about your ideas. I've been such a fool." The party continued around them, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. Christmas carols played softly from hidden speakers, the words suddenly mockingly appropriate. "I'll be home for Christmas, if only in my dreams." "I have to go after her," Samuel said suddenly, moving toward the door. "I have to stop her before—" "She's on a plane by now," Maria interrupted gently. "She planned it carefully, sir. Said she needed a clean break." Samuel stood in the middle of his perfect Christmas party, surrounded by happiness and celebration, feeling more alone than he had in his entire life. The letter burned in his hand like a brand of shame. "Everyone needs to leave," he said, his voice carrying the authority that had built his empire. "Now, the party's over." As their guests filed out in confused silence, Samuel made his way to the Christmas tree. The ornaments caught the light like tears, each one a memory of their life together, the coffee cup that started it all, the Swiss chalet from their honeymoon, the delicate snowflake from their engagement. He reached for his phone, dialing Lola's number with trembling fingers. It went straight to voicemail, her warm voice washing over him like a ghost. "You've reached Lola Peterborough. Please leave a message." Peterborough. She was still using his name, at least for now. How long before that changed too? How long before all traces of their life together were erased? The penthouse felt cavernous now, every corner haunted by memories. He could see her everywhere, dancing with him in the kitchen, working at her laptop by the window, sleeping peacefully in their bed. How had he not noticed the sadness growing in her eyes? How had he missed the signs that she was slipping away? As Christmas Eve ticked over into Christmas morning, Samuel Peterborough stood alone in his winter wonderland, holding a letter that had shattered his world. Outside, the Dallas skyline sparkled with holiday lights, each one a star he'd trade just to have one more moment to make things right. But some gifts, once lost, can't be easily reclaimed, and some Christmas wishes are too late in the making. Chapter 11. The Search for Love. Christmas morning dawned cold and grey over Dallas, the city shrouded in a mist that turned the skyline into ghostly shadows. Samuel hadn't slept, spending the night pacing their penthouse, reading and rereading Lola's letter until the words were burned into his memory. Every corner held echoes of her. Her coffee cup still in the sink, her novel dog-eared on the side table, her scent lingering on the pillows she hadn't slept on for days. His phone lay silent on the kitchen counter, dozens of unanswered calls to her number marked only by voicemail responses. Each message he'd left grew more desperate than the last. "Lola, please come home. We can talk about this. Whatever you're thinking, it's not true. Gretchen means nothing to me. I love you, only you, always you. Please, just tell me you're safe." By dawn, he was sitting in his home office, surrounded by papers and laptop screens, his business efficiency now turned to a different purpose. He'd already contacted every airline that flew to Georgetown, but without her flight details, they couldn't help. His private investigators were working on tracking her movements, but Lola had been clever. She'd withdrawn cash over several days, leaving no immediate electronic trail. A knock at the door interrupted his focused searching. Maria entered with a tray of coffee and toast, her face lined with concern. "You need to eat something, Mr. Peterborough," she said gently, setting the tray beside him. "It won't help Mrs. Peterborough if you make yourself sick." Samuel looked up, suddenly remembering something. "You knew. You helped her plan this. Why didn't you tell me?" Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Because I saw her heart breaking every day, sir. I saw how she watched you with Ms. Thomas, how she tried to be strong, how she cried when she thought no one could hear. She made me promise not to tell you until this morning, said she needed time to disappear." "I never meant to hurt her," Samuel whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't realize." "No," Maria agreed softly. "You didn't realize. You were so busy trying to fix everything, her illness, the business, the future, that you forgot to see what was right in front of you." Samuel stood abruptly, moving to the window. The city below was coming to life, families gathering for Christmas celebrations, children opening presents, lovers sharing quiet moments, everything he should have been doing with Lola. "I need to find her," he said, more to himself than Maria. "But first, I need to understand where I went wrong." He spent the morning in their bedroom, opening drawers and closets, looking for clues he might have missed. In her vanity drawer, he found a journal he'd never seen before. His hands trembled as he opened it, recognizing her elegant handwriting. Another late meeting with Gretchen today. Samuel came home excited about their breakthroughs on the project. I should be happy for him. This is what he loves after all. But I saw my reflection in the mirror as he talked about her, saw how pale and thin I've become, how my hands shake when I try to gesture like I used to. No wonder he prefers her company. The entry was dated just 2 weeks ago. Samuel's heart clenched as he read on, seeing their life together through her eyes. Page after page revealed her struggles, not just with her illness, but with her fear of losing him, her determination to stay strong, her growing certainty that she was holding him back. In their closet he found a shirt of his that she used to sleep in, carefully folded and placed in a drawer. The gesture seemed to symbolize everything: her love, her care, her quiet acceptance of what she believed was inevitable. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. It was Gretchen. "Samuel, are you all right? I've been trying to reach you about the Houston timeline." "Stop!" he cut her off. "Just stop!" "The project is on hold. Everything's on hold. But the permits, the deadlines—" "I don't care about permits!" His voice rose with sudden anger. At himself, at the situation, at his own blindness. "My wife is gone. Nothing else matters right now." There was a long pause on the other end. "I never meant—" Gretchen began. "I know," Samuel said, his voice softening. "Neither did I. But intention doesn't change the result. I let myself get caught up in the excitement of the project, in your enthusiasm and ideas, and I forgot what really matters. Who really matters?" After hanging up, he returned to his search with renewed determination. Opening his laptop, he began researching Georgetown, Guyana, its layout, its people, its customs. He found himself reading about traditional healing practices, about Buddhist temples and monks who specialized in treating mysterious illnesses. A memory stirred, Lola talking about her childhood home, about the mix of cultures and traditions in Georgetown. She'd mentioned a temple where her grandmother used to take her, a place of peace and healing. His hands flew over the keyboard, searching for Buddhist temples in Georgetown. There weren't many, and only one that specialized in healing. Could it be? Would she seek treatment there, away from the sterile hospitals and endless tests? Samuel called his pilot immediately. "Get the jet ready, we're flying to Georgetown." While the flight was being prepared, he packed quickly, just one small bag with essentials. But at the last moment, he returned to their Christmas tree, carefully removing the coffee cup ornament that had started their story. He wrapped it in tissue paper and tucked it into his pocket. In the elevator down to his waiting car, Samuel caught his reflection in the mirrored walls. He looked haunted, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness and worry. But there was something else there too. Determination, yes, but also understanding. For the first time, he was seeing himself clearly, seeing how his actions, however well-intentioned, had pushed away the one person who mattered most. The drive to the airport was a blur of Christmas decorations and happy families, each sight a reminder of what he'd lost through his own blindness. But as the jet took off into the grey December sky, Samuel felt something he hadn't expected: hope. Because now he understood. It wasn't just about finding Lola. It was about proving to her that she hadn't been wrong to love him, to trust him, to build a life with him. He needed to show her that their love story wasn't over. It was just waiting for him to write the next chapter right. As Dallas disappeared beneath the clouds, Samuel held the tissue-wrapped ornament in his pocket like a talisman. Somewhere in Georgetown, in a temple of healing and hope, Lola was waiting. Whether she knew it or not, whether she wanted him to or not, he was coming for her. This time, he wouldn't let business calls distract him. He wouldn't let ambitious project managers turn his head. He wouldn't let anything stand between him and the woman who had spilled coffee with him, danced with him in Switzerland, fought illness with him, and loved him enough to let him go. Because sometimes love means crossing oceans to say I'm sorry. Sometimes it means leaving everything behind to find what matters most. And sometimes it means believing in Christmas miracles, even when all hope seems lost. As the plane pointed toward Georgetown, Samuel closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to whatever forces had brought Lola into his life in the first place. "Please," he breathed, "let me find her. Let me make this right. Let me bring her home. The coffee cup ornament in his pocket seemed to warm slightly, as if carrying the echo of that first meeting, that first spark, that first realization that some loves are worth fighting for, worth crossing continents for, worth giving up empires for, worth changing everything for. Samuel Peterborough, the man who had built his life on careful plans and calculated risks, was now flying blind into the unknown. But for the first time since Lola had walked into that boardroom and changed his world, he felt absolutely certain of his direction. He was going to find his wife, and this time he would make sure she never had reason to doubt his love again. Chapter 12. Love's Healing Light. Georgetown greeted Samuel with a symphony of colors and scents that seemed worlds away from Dallas's steel and glass canyons. The morning air was heavy with tropical warmth, carrying hints of frangipani and sea salt as his car wound through streets where colonial architecture stood proudly alongside modern buildings. Everything Lola had described came alive before his eyes. The street vendors selling fresh mangoes, the mix of cultures evident in every face he passed, the feeling of stepping into a world where time moved at its own gentle pace. His driver, an elderly local man named Joseph, seemed to sense the urgency of his mission. "The Buddhist temple you seek is special place," he said, navigating through the morning traffic. "Many come there for healing, not just of body, but of spirit." Samuel clutched the tissue-wrapped ornament in his pocket, his heart racing as they approached the temple grounds. The building rose before them, its white walls gleaming in the morning sun, prayer flags dancing in the ocean breeze. It looked exactly as Lola had described it from her childhood memories, a place of peace, of hope, of possibilities. At the temple entrance, a young monk greeted him with quiet dignity. "How may we help you find peace today?" she asked, her accent similar to the one that had first captured Samuel's heart in that Dallas boardroom. "I'm looking for my wife," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "Lola Peterborough. She might be here seeking treatment." Something flickered in the monk's eyes. Recognition, sympathy. "Ah," she said softly, "you are the husband." Samuel's heart leaped. "She's here. Please, I need to see her." The monk studied him carefully. "Mrs. Peterborough came to us seeking healing, not just for her body, but for her heart. Are you sure your presence will help with that healing?" "I'm not sure of anything anymore," Samuel admitted, his carefully constructed business persona crumbling. "Except that I love her, that I was a fool, that I'll spend the rest of my life making up for my mistakes if she'll let me." The monk's expression softened. "Follow me," she said, turning to lead him through the temple corridors. The interior was cool and peaceful, sunlight filtering through colorful windows to create patterns on the stone floors. The scent of incense mixed with tropical flowers reminded Samuel of Lola's perfume, making his heart ache with longing. They passed through a courtyard where other patients sat in meditation or gentle exercise. Samuel scanned each face desperately, but Lola wasn't among them. The monk led him deeper into the temple, to a private garden where water trickled musically from a small fountain. "Wait here," she instructed. "I will tell her you have come." Samuel stood in the garden, surrounded by flowers he didn't know the names of, but that Lola would surely recognize. Minutes stretched like hours as he waited, replaying in his mind all the things he needed to say, all the apologies he needed to make. And then he heard it, the soft click of a door opening. He turned, and the world stopped spinning. Lola stood in the doorway wearing a simple white dress that made her look like an angel in the morning light. Her illness had left its marks, but there was a new strength in her posture, a peace in her expression that he hadn't seen in months. She was still the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Samuel." Her voice carried surprise and something else. Uncertainty, fear, hope. "How did you find me?" He took a step toward her, then stopped, respecting the space between them. I remembered everything you ever told me about your childhood, about this place. Once I started really listening to my memories of you, instead of just hearing what I wanted to hear, the path was clear. Lola moved into the garden, her steps careful but steady. You shouldn't have come. I left so you could be free, so you could have the life you deserve without— Without what? Samuel interrupted gently. Without the woman I love? Without the person who makes every success meaningless if I can't share it with her? Without my heart? Tears shimmered in her hazel eyes. You have Gretchen now, the project, your dreams. Samuel pulled the coffee cup ornament from his pocket, unwrapping it with trembling fingers. Do you remember this? The day we really met? I didn't spill that coffee by accident. You know, I was so desperate to talk to you that I ruined my best suit just to have an excuse. A small smile tugged at her lips despite her tears. I knew. I always knew. Then why didn't I realize that you knew about Gretchen, that you could see what I was too blind to see myself? He took another step closer. There's nothing between us, Lola. There never was. I got caught up in the project, in the challenge, in the distraction it provided from my fear of losing you to your illness. But she's not you. No one could ever be you. But I'm not the same person anymore, Lola whispered. I'm not the strong, independent woman you fell in love with. I need help sometimes. I have limitations. And I'm not the same man, Samuel countered. I'm not the foolish businessman who thought he could fix everything with money and determination. I'm not the husband who took your love for granted. I'm someone new, someone who finally understands what really matters. He closed the distance between them, holding out the ornament like an offering. Our love story started with spilled coffee and a ruined tie. It survived illness and distance and my own stupid blindness. Please, my love, don't let it end, because I forgot to show you every day that you're the only dream I've ever had worth fighting for. Lola's hands trembled as she took the ornament, turning it in the morning light. The monks here have been helping me, she said softly, not just with my illness, but with finding peace, with accepting that sometimes love means letting go. Then let me prove that sometimes love means holding on, Samuel pleaded. Let me show you that I can be the husband you deserve, not perfect, but perfectly yours. Let me come to your treatments, support your healing, rebuild our life together whatever way works for us. What about the Houston project? I've put everything on hold. Nothing matters except us. He reached for her hand, hope soaring when she didn't pull away. Come home with me, Lola. Or let me stay here with you until you're ready. I'll wait as long as it takes. Do whatever you need. Just please don't give up on us. Lola looked down at their joined hands, then up at the temple walls that had given her sanctuary. The treatments here. They're helping. The monks combined traditional medicine with spiritual healing. I'm getting stronger, but it's a slow process. Then we'll be slow together, Samuel said firmly. I'll move heaven and earth to get the monks to continue your treatment in Dallas, or I'll build a life here in Georgetown. Whatever you want, wherever you want. Just tell me we have a chance. The morning sun broke through the clouds then, bathing the garden in golden light. A warm breeze carried the scent of flowers and possibility, and somewhere in the temple, bells began to chime. I never stopped loving you, Lola confessed, tears spilling down her cheeks. Even when I thought I had to let you go, I loved you so much it broke my heart. Samuel gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she might disappear again. Then let me spend the rest of our lives putting it back together. She fit against him perfectly, just as she always had. Her tears soaked into his shirt as his fell into her hair, their hearts beating in sync like they had never been apart. Stay with me, she whispered against his chest. Here, at the temple. Let me finish my healing, but stay with me while I do. Forever, he promised, anywhere, everywhere, forever. The young monk who had led Samuel to the garden appeared silently, a gentle smile on her face. "The temple welcomes those who seek healing together," she said softly. "We have rooms for families who wish to support their loved ones through treatment." Samuel looked at Lola questioningly, hope shining in his eyes. She nodded, a real smile breaking across her face like sunrise. In the days and weeks that followed, they built a new life within the temple walls. Samuel learned to slow down, to appreciate the gentle rhythm of temple life. He attended Lola's treatments, learned meditation techniques to help with her healing, and discovered that sometimes the greatest strength lies in simply being present. Lola grew stronger each day, not just physically but in spirit. Having Samuel there, fully present and devoted, helped her heal in ways the monk's medicines alone could not. They rediscovered each other in quiet conversations and peaceful walks through the temple gardens, their love deepening like a river, finding its true course. The Houston project remained on hold, but Samuel found he didn't miss it. Instead, he began drawing up plans for a new kind of development, a healing center in Dallas that would combine Western medicine with the holistic approaches he'd learned at the temple. It would be their shared legacy, a way to help others find the healing they had found together. 3 months later, they stood in the same garden where they had reunited, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Lola's strength had returned enough for them to consider returning home, but something had changed in both of them. Home, they had learned, wasn't a penthouse in Dallas or a temple in Georgetown. It was wherever they faced life together. "Dance with me," Samuel asked, holding out his hand, just as he had so many times before. Lola took it without hesitation, her movements sure and graceful as they swayed together in the fading light. No music played, except the symphony of their hearts beating as one. No words were needed except the quiet, "I love you," they breathed into each other's ears. As night fell over Georgetown, stars appeared in the tropical sky like diamonds scattered on velvet. In the temple garden, a couple danced slowly, their shadows merging into one. They had learned that true love isn't about being perfect. It's about being perfectly committed to each other through every storm, every challenge, every moment of doubt. Their story hadn't ended on that Christmas Eve in Dallas. Instead, it had transformed, like a flower breaking through concrete to reach the sun. Because sometimes love needs to be broken to grow stronger, sometimes hearts need to be separated to beat more truly as one, and sometimes the greatest Christmas miracle is realizing that love, real love, is worth fighting for. Again and again, through every season until the end of time.